Our country, your bank.
Good morning and welcome to Open Your Eyes.
Start your morning right.
I'm Sabrina Daly.
And I'm Asani Clayetano. Good morning.
And good morning, Isani. How are you feeling after the long weekend?
A little under the weather, but I'm here.
Okay.
I'm not complaining. I'm a soldier.
Well, I'm certainly hoping that everyone feels rested at least. Of course, we enjoyed an extended weekend to celebrate Labor Day. So I personally feel like the best way to celebrate Labor Day is to not labor. But yes, it is Tuesday morning, the day after our holiday celebrated on Monday. And there was quite a few activities that took place over the weekend, including, I think, what everyone was looking forward to was the National Showgrounds, the Agriculture Show and Trade Show set to take place in Belmopan. And it seemed like it drew out a crowd.
Well, I think over the years, the Agric Show has sort of solidified its attendance, if I could describe it as such, in terms of persons who travel from various parts of the country to descend on the National Agriculture and Trade Show grounds in Belmopan. And this year was no different. I think several reasons why persons would have been drawn to the showgrounds, which, from what I understand, did fairly well in terms of attendance. Several reasons being the dog show, the rodeo. I think that's one of the biggest draws, the annual rodeo. Yeah. And leading up to it, when we spoke with various company representatives and the idea that they were marketing their product and they were choosing locations that was close to the rodeo grounds itself, says a lot that that particular activity has its following, and I guess it's growing over time.
I agree. I think what certainly drew the crowd, like you mentioned, was the fact that there was an opportunity for persons to take advantage of certain deals from businesses. Of course, there were additional features to the agriculture show as well, and I believe one of the newest one was the dog shows that was taking place on 2 days. But I think overall, I enjoyed seeing the way that people came out and they supported the agriculture industry. I saw a lot of cowboy hats. You'd either think that it was the agriculture show or a Beyonce concert. But it certainly looked like it was an enjoyable experience. I wish I was there. I know I promised a lot of the businesses that came on the show that I would be front and center, either on the rodeo or supporting in one way or another, but I was supporting from wherever I was. That said, though, I know that we also had somewhat of a concert feature there as well, so persons did come out to enjoy the entertainment too. But I also saw some mishaps that took place there as well with that entertainment.
It as a freak incident.
What also took place with the entertainment was those rides that would normally travel in different areas of Belize. And we saw quite a disturbing video of a young lady seemingly caught in the Ferris wheel, and an individual having to what looked like climb the Ferris wheel to cut off a portion of her hair. I believe we have footage of that, so if we're able to show what that looked like, perhaps we can do so. But I'll tell you,
it's an unfortunate situation.
That right there, you're looking at it there.
It's an unfortunate situation because nobody gets on a ride thinking that something like this would happen to them.
Look at that, they're cutting her hair.
Yeah. At the same time, there's a certain, I don't know, system in place that ensures safety while you're on these kinds of rides, right? I don't think in a million years this person would have thought that her hair, of all things, would get caught in.
I've been on a Ferris wheel once in my entire life, and I can't even say that I had the full experience because I went probably only halfway. And I screamed and screamed until they took it back down. But I have to tell you, these things can happen. And for me, perhaps it's just my level of scare and feeling afraid of these things. But I remember many, many years ago, Isani, being on one of these rides, and I think it was called the Devil's Ride. It wasn't as high in the air as that was. But I was sitting in one of the chairs, and we were rushing at full speed. And I remember sitting in that chair with my best friend, realizing that the bar could not lock. And it was like something right out of a Final Destination movie where your life sort of flashes before your eyes and you realize that you have to do everything possible to remain intact and to be as safe as you possibly can. And I could imagine that that was probably a similar experience this young lady went through. I don't know how exactly that pulled her hair into whatever was there, but I can imagine just moving would pull it even more. And that had to be absolutely scary.
I don't think anyone plans for that kind of a haircut.
Yeah.
I mean, that's wild.
Yeah, that must have been a massive headache after
Yeah.
too. But what also took place over the weekend was the Park Fest, and we also had folks here talking about it and getting the viewers excited. We even had Brittany Starr here giving a bit of a teaser of just some of the performances that you can expect. As far as I know, it looked like it went well, but there was an incident that was also shared online of an individual that got stabbed too.
I mean, when you have these kinds of events and mass gathering, people don't necessarily attend with a view that they will, be the victim of any kind of crime and violence situation. But unfortunately, it happens, and you can't really put that on the lack of security or if there's any kind of criticism along those lines. It's the fact that while perhaps you and I would attend an event and we're not looking for trouble, we can't speak for the next person, right? And we have to accept what it really is. I mean, in Belize City, you have gangs, you have groups of people who have conflict with each other, and when they attend these kinds of events and they encounter each other, it creates an issue, right?
Yeah.
And you have situations where innocent bystanders are the ones who actually get hurt because of these types of conflicts, right? I think beyond the stabbing incident, regrettable as it was, this was also an event that was well attended. I think Belizeans were looking forward to it. When you look at what Labor Day is and how it is celebrated, and how all of these promoters put together their shows and everything, it's the kind of ticket where people say, okay, you know what? Aside from the agric, I will attend this particular event, the Park Fest. But I'll say this much, Sabrina, it was hot over the weekend.
Yeah.
It was brutal.
It was.
Right? So my hat goes off for persons who attended either of these two events. More so the one at in Belmopan, because
agriculture
at least
show.
Park Fest is seaside. Perhaps there was a bit of breeze. I don't know. I wasn't in attendance, but in Belmopan, I could only imagine that heat. 3 days of it.
Yeah, well, what also seemingly took place over the weekend was a big race for well-known athlete Kaya Katus, and she traveled to Cozumel to participate in what she called a family tradition for the past 25 years, and she returned victorious, placing first place. So I want to say a special congratulations to Kaya on that win. This has to be something that becomes, I don't know if it gets easy for her after a while, because she's just been raking in these wins here and there, Isani.
Well, the thing is, she has been riding at an elite level for some time now, and if this is something that they as a family look forward to on an annual basis, I would presume that it gets easier as opposed to more challenging. Well, that depends on who she is competing against, right? Because while she and her family may very well be staples in that particular race, you do have other riders who are taking part as well, who come with a certain caliber, if I could use that description.
Absolutely. This one's more on, I think, somber side, but there has been reports that the taxi man that went missing for quite some time has been found. And of course, he was also found dead. This was something that I believe we also shared in our newscast. of individuals looking for him as well, correct?
Yes, yes, yes. There's been there's been uh, sufficient coverage of this disappearance earlier this year, and of course the fact that several weeks, I presume, after we had initially reported that uh, the gentleman had been reported missing from Corozal, his vehicle was discovered in the Fresh Pond area, and a family was charged for possession of stolen property or handling stolen property. And they vehemently refuted the charge. I could recall that as well. But the gentleman was not found. So when we heard of it over the weekend that, you know, he was finally discovered, I mean, albeit lifeless, perhaps for the family it brings a sense of closure. I don't know if they would have given up hope on finding him alive from the days gone by, but the fact that, you know, they actually have a body, perhaps, I don't know, I'm just, you know, making an assumption there.
Yeah,
But at least it brings some form of closure to them.
I think these types of news are always bittersweet because, as you mentioned, it's better to know what happened to your family member than to spend years and years questioning what had taken place. As you mentioned, this was something that was heavily covered in our newscast. With the vehicle being discovered, I still don't think that that was enough closure for the family member. So I'm just hoping that around this time they're able to experience that type of closure that they feel that they need, and they're able to move on with a bit more of peace. But what also was interesting, and perhaps this was the closing to the weekend, there was a power outage, Isani. How did you handle when Courant gone last night?
Well, it was hot, first of all. It was brutal. And when we had a power outage last night, well, this morning actually, at least in my side of the city.
It was this morning for you guys?
Yeah.
Okay, so the power went out for us.
For us, it was less than 5 minutes.
What?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I was asleep for a while. Let me put it this way. I was asleep for a while, and I would not have noticed if there was a power outage in the first instance.
Okay.
If that were the case.
Because it
I
went
know that
earlier last night.
I know. When I woke up this morning, it would have probably been like around 3 o'clock or so.
Okay.
It was less than 5 minutes though.
So the power went out last night for us in Borrolboom, and I saw quite a few other people posting online saying, you know, that the power was out in different parts of the country. I believe Corozal I saw. But there was a notice that went out last night.
Yeah.
And I think it was probably out for about 2 hours or so. But BEL put out a notice saying that it advised their customers and the public that CFE Mexico has notified them that they are encountering difficulties in maintaining supply to our grid. They have therefore asked us to make the necessary arrangements to supply demand from our local generation sources. Demand for electricity is currently just over 100 MW, while the maximum available in-country capacity is around 84. That's interesting if you really think about the amount of electricity that we're consuming. And as the days and nights get hotter, I imagine we consume even more. But yes, there was a power outage for about 2 hours last night. I know everyone was crossing their fingers hoping that it did not continue through the entire night, and so it did not. But we're hoping that this isn't something that would become more of a regular situation. Thankfully, they were able to secure back our power, and it did go earlier this morning for about 5 minutes or so. And I did wake up through that too, because it was hot.
Yeah.
But that does it for just some of the topics that has currently been trending online. Of course, this is a Monday, Tuesday, so we do have our eye on the news for you next.
So, in our newscast on Friday, we covered an incident where there was a house fire on Raccoon Street here in Belize City. And at the time of our initial coverage, we were informed by a neighbor that the mother and her child, her infant son, were hospitalized for various degrees of burns that they received during this fire. Sadly, both the mother and child have passed. The son, I believe we covered his passing on Sunday, if I'm not mistaken. And then yesterday, the mother also succumbed to the injuries that she received as a result of this tragic house fire. There's a lot to sort of think of, put together when you're looking at an issue like this. This was a house fire that took place while they were inside, while they were asleep, I was told, or I was made to understand. And you could imagine, Sabrina, as a parent, having to do everything that is humanly possible within your means to be able to save your child and then save yourself from this kind of an incident. It's selfless, to say the very least, that a mother would do everything to be able to save her child. But it's unfortunate that, this has happened. And part of what we will be doing today certainly is to be able to get a more personal understanding of the woman and her child. As I mentioned, on Friday we were unable to do so because they were both hospitalized, so we were only able to speak with the neighbor who rendered assistance. So today we're seeking to find the family members and get a better understanding of who this woman was. In my humble opinion, notwithstanding the tragic nature of it, being able to do your best to save yourself and your child's life is noble in and of itself. It's an act of heroism, right? But there was a picture, we won't share it for obvious reasons, but there was a photo that was taken of the mother and child after they had escaped the fire. And you can see the degree of injuries that both of them had suffered as a result of this blaze.
Yeah. It takes me to a conversation that we had last week with station supervisor of the fire department, Kenneth Mortiz, talking about the different types of fires that can take place. Now, he spoke of house fires and, of course, the various types of fires that you can experience in your home. And that is a conversation now that I think I keep on replaying in my mind, because the worst thing that anyone could ever experience, I believe personally, is realizing that your home is on fire and that took place while you were asleep. Not being able to control the fire anymore and simply having to grapple with the fact that you have to try to escape.
Yeah.
Not even worse, try to escape with your loved ones. I can't imagine what that level of fear looks like. And to know that this individual, this lady, was able to come out of the blaze with her child, of course, not being able to survive days later, but I would never want to be in a situation like that. I think, though, as I mentioned, based on the conversation that we have been having with Kenneth Mortiz, I urge our viewers to ensure that their electrical wiring are the way that they should be, if that's the case, because we do know that that is a common way that house fires do start. Aside from that, ensure that nothing is lit, nothing is plugged in unnecessarily. The last thing you want is something like this to take place while you're asleep or even when you're not home.
Yeah, it's most unfortunate. So we'll move away from that topic. We'll discuss what is set to take place later today at the National Assembly. There will be somewhat of a ceremonial sitting in honor of the late Toledo East Area Representative Michael Espat. And that will be covered live this afternoon from the Assembly Building in Belmopan. I understand that preparations are underway for an official funeral to be held on the 10th of May for Mike Espat. And while the United Democratic Party had issued its condolences to the family of Mr. Espat, they are wasting no time in mobilizing in Toledo East, because naturally with Mr. Espat's passing, it creates a vacuum that needs to be filled. And the way to do so is via a by-elections.
Which they do have a time limit to
Yes,
carry out.
there is a time frame for that. It's within 90 days, right? So it's a 3-month window within which this exercise has to be conducted. So over the weekend, the UDP, including party leader Shine Barrow, including the mayoral candidate who ran recently, and of course Eden Martinez, who was a former era representative, they met along with Dennis Garbett, who is the candidate that has been chosen to run in Toledo East. And so they have begun the process of canvassing the constituency. The People's United Party, on the other hand, is still very much, concerned with a proper send-off for Mike Espat. So they haven't, as far as I know, given a date for any convention to be held to determine who is going to run against Mr. Garbett in Toledo East. However, the CEO of the Ministry of Economic Development has openly stated his interest to run in that constituency. And this was before Mr. Espat had passed away, right? And I'm presuming that there will be several other potential candidates, and they will face off in a convention, and then the best man or woman moves forward. Excuse me. But there's a lot that's going on the political front where that is concerned. On Thursday, we spoke with Julius Espat, who's the first cousin of Mike Espat, and who's also a deputy leader in the PUP. And he shared very strong views about what happened and how it happened in respect of Mike Espat. Excuse me. Right? So that's something we're also talking about.
Yes. I think what I remember in last week's newscast, as you mentioned, was Honorable Julius Espat speaking about his discontent in the way that the conversation has been going as it relates to Honorable Mike Espat and persons throwing out their interests in taking his seat in Toledo East. Before he passed away, I believe he even expressed feeling or hearing that Mike Espat felt disrespected. And that was something that I think a lot of people have been having that conversation following his passing. I know that Isani mentioned since then there has been some names that were thrown out of individuals sharing their interest. And one of those individuals, as Isani mentioned, quite before the passing of Honorable Mike Espat was the CEO of the Ministry of Economic Development, Dr. Osman Martinez. We actually had him here on set with us, and we posed that question to him. He spoke of ways that he would like to contribute to the constituency, ways that he felt, based on his experience, he can bring development to that constituency as well, particularly economic development. And as we know, one of the conversations that we regularly have with individuals, or individuals would mention when they speak about the Toledo district, is the fact that it seems to be a forgotten district. So I think around this time, as we've been mentioning, as Minister Julius Espat, the Prime Minister has mentioned, we're all hoping to give the late Honorable Mike Espat a proper send-off, one that he absolutely deserves. And following that, then the conversation about succession will follow. As we mentioned, there has been quite a few names that has been thrown out, including his own relatives. So we will be seeing what takes place after.
And then you have Wally Nunes.
Yes, Wally Nunes, of course, we know him as the mayor of San Pedro. Now, there has been talks, Isani, of him throwing out his hat in the bigger leagues. There has been talks of him being interested in taking part in the general elections. Now, we've had Mayor Wally Nunes here on set as well in the special coverage that we were providing last month leading up to the municipal elections. And it was interesting because I don't remember him really sharing his interests in general elections, in the general elections. He simply spoke of him being interested in continuing his work in San Pedro. So this is an interesting twist.
I recall my colleague Marion had been probing him regarding this foray into the I'm trying to find the word here. It's not at the mayoral level, it's at the central government level.
Yes.
Right? What is interesting here, Sabrina, is the fact that he would be challenging Andre Perez for that seat. And the Prime Minister was on record recently stating that Mr. Perez had, as a area rep for Belize Rural South, went above and beyond to assist in delivering that municipality. So it's interesting that Wally Nunes now is offering himself as a potential candidate for BRS.
What does that mean? What do you think that means, Isani, for the relationship between Honorable Andre Perez and Mayor Wally Nunes? Is this potentially showing that there may be a bit of a fracture in their friendship?
I wouldn't think so. I mean,
just healthy competition?
Because at the end of the day, and this is how I look at it, right? If you have political ambitions, that's a personal and a professional pursuit. And it's like the deputy mayor of Belize City, who had indicated initially that he wanted to run for the mayoral post. That's his ambition.
But we also saw how that turned out, or how it's turning out currently. There is a clear tension between them.
It's similar to the CEO coming out and saying, well, I want to run too. And in this case, the mayor, but let me step back for a second. This is what I've struggled to understand for quite some time when something like this happens, where this individual ran and was sworn in for 3 years. It's a 3-year term. The municipalities are scheduled for 2025, which would be a year or a little under a year into this particular term of office. Why would you shortchange the people? That's my question. Why would you shortchange the voters who elected you to serve as the mayor in this case?
I believe that was also a point of discussion that we had during our election coverage as well, where we know that there has been talks of individuals running for office at the municipal level that also had interests in central government. And that was a fair question, Isani, because why do you run for this post if you know that you have interests in another post that you'd have to obviously take on in less than your term? It's an interesting one. I think this was also a question that was brought up, or a point that was brought up with the deputy mayor, because I believe he also had interests in being a part of central government, which would obviously lead him to take part in the general elections. But my question still stands. Do we think that this will potentially create tension over that side of the constituency? Because we have examples of how it turned out with our mayor here in Belize City and our deputy mayor. Will it be the same?
We'll see what the Prime Minister and party leader will say when it comes to this particular development.
Absolutely.
Right? So I guess that brings us to the end of our conversation this morning where the Island News is concerned. Certainly these details of these stories and more you will be able to catch live at 6 p.m. in our evening newscast. If you're not around your TV, that's fine. You can catch us on Facebook and YouTube as well. That does it for the Island News.
Wonderful. And from the eye on the news to our eye opener. Of course, our eye opener is taken from dailyhound.com, and it goes like this. Each one of us is very much needed, and we all have our role to play, adding to the success of the whole. In the great symphony of life, we all have important parts to play. Any one member of an orchestra doing less than their best at their particular part can destroy the harmony of the whole piece. Such is their importance. So although we may not receive the same amount or quality of attention as another, all of our contributions are valuable and integral to the success of the whole. When we do our tasks well, we infuse them with our unique energy, making each act a gift. We can look around us at any moment to see that while we nurture some people with our work, others are supporting us with their gifts. When we can be fully present in every job that we do, we bring the fullness of our bodies, minds, and spirits to the moment. Our contribution is enhanced by the infusion of our talents and abilities. And when we give them willingly, they attract the right people and circumstances into our experience. By giving the best in us to make the world around us better, we open ourselves to receive the best from the universe in return.
I liken this to being a team player and being able to execute your role to the best of your ability in being able to satisfy the whole, so to speak, right? When people understand their place and their role in families, at work, friendship, or whatever other configuration, you have a distinct role to play. And whatever it is important in terms of the entire movement of not only yourself, but the people who are around you. So if you look at it like from a family's perspective, if I use myself, for instance, right? I'm not only a caregiver, I'm also a breadwinner. I'm also, a listening ear. And those are only a few of the roles that I play. But it's in terms of being able to move the family ahead or move the family forward, right? If I look at myself at work, I also have a role to play here, which, I'm looking at it as team building. I'm looking at it as being able to fulfill your role. And there's a certain satisfaction that comes with that. At the end of the day, when you sit down and say, you know what, I've done this for my child, or you say, you know what, I was able to accomplish this on behalf of my team at work today, it's gratifying.
Absolutely. I love that. I love the point of view that you brought. I think another part that also stood out to me in this eye opener spoke to what I consider intention, where it says here, our contribution is enhanced by the infusion of our talents and abilities, and when we give them willingly, they attract the right people and circumstances into our experience. By giving the best in us to make the world around us better, we open ourselves to receive the best from the universe in return. And that was the reason why I thought of intention, because a lot of times there are individuals or people who are good at something. They know that they have a talent or a gift. And sometimes you might share that gift, but not with the best intentions. And because of that, the universe or God may not reward you in the way that you had expected after you sharing that gift. And that's why I think while team player is an important aspect to have in every part of your life, not only the workplace. I love the analogy that you gave with family, because I think oftentimes we don't associate being a team player with the family dynamic or those other forms of relationships. But I think the intention that you set, the intention that you have in the acts or the gifts that you share is also what determines the type of receiving that you get as well.
Excellent.
Quite an interesting eye-opener. Moving now into our weather update, Doe, and of course our weather is brought to you by the National Meteorological Service.
Warm and mostly dry conditions will support sunny skies with a few cloudy spells today and cloudy skies at times tonight. Showers will be isolated, along with the chance of isolated thunderstorms developing inland this afternoon. This trend will continue Wednesday and Wednesday night. Winds today along the coast and over the open seas will blow from the east, 10 to 20 knots, and seas will be moderate. Low tides will occur at 7:38 this morning and 10:07 tonight. High tides follow at 1:56 this afternoon and 4:50 tomorrow morning. Temperatures this afternoon will peak at 84 Fahrenheit up in the Maya Mountains, 88 along the coast, and 97 inland. A heat alert is in process, and residents, especially those living inland, are advised to stay hydrated and avoid outdoor activities as much as possible. The moon will set at 10:59 this morning and sunset is at 6:13 this evening. In the sargassum forecast, sargassum continues to increase over the area and the chances of more mats drifting onto beaches across the country remains high. In the fire forecast, the fire risk around the country is at a maximum, and this will remain so for the next 24 hours. That's the latest from the Belize Weather Bureau. Do have a pleasant day.
All right, that was your weather update, and take heed of the information. I'm sure it could be of use to everyone, whether you're inside or outdoors. Now we have our show lineup to provide to you, and we have an interesting conversation to look forward to. Of course, we've been talking about cruise tourism in our newscasts on a regular basis, but I think this conversation will be pretty interesting because of the association. We'll be joined by an independent consultant, and he will be exploring the cruise tourism crisis from a banking perspective. So that conversation may take quite a while. We encourage you to ask your questions. You can do so as early as now, and we'll be sure to share them with that consultant as well. Later on in the show, we'll also have some tidbits of other things we'll be dropping in, so you definitely want to stay tuned to that as well. But we got to take that first break, and when we come back, the conversation about cruise tourism and banking starts.
David Humes, this is Vanessa Humes. We own Ladyville Cool Spot. Belize Bank save us a lot of time. Working with them, we can keep track exactly what we spend. We recommend Belize Bank 100% because we don't have to go to stand up in line, and we can check on our account right from our house. Working with Belize Bank is the best.
Prepare for the heat and stay cool with a Rheem-or-Gree air conditioning unit from Benny's. Choose the right BTU unit size for your bedroom or living room and enjoy complete comfort. You can also save money with an inverter unit that is energy efficient. When the heat is on, stay cool and comfortable with an affordable, dependable AC unit from Rheem-or-Gree. Available at Benny's. Quality and savings.
Discover a shopping experience like no other at the V Department Store. They carry a vast array of products at unbeatable prices. Elevate your shopping journey with affordability, diversity, and accessibility at the V. Conveniently located at 1745 Coney Drive in Belize City.
Wake up! Wake up! Now, which cheese you think you may eat all the while? Gallo cheese with the blue rooster on the label is the traditional and the real deal. The original Dutch, redback, or hard cheese in a Belize. Be aware. Check your label and make sure it is in English and for the Belize market. Gallo cheese with the blue rooster. The real deal. Santiago Castillo Limited, supporting and building our Belizean community for 95 years and counting.
Gallo Edam Dutch cheese, aged and tropicalized, the best formula for the Belize market, exclusively distributed by Santiago Castillo Limited.
Do you know how to choose the best engine oil for your car? We believe the best engine oil should provide optimal performance and ultimate protection for longer. For Quartz engine oil, our engineers have formulated age resistance technology, also known as ART. It's a breakthrough innovation. The interaction between oil molecules is increased, creating a super-resistant molecular structure. So whatever the conditions, it helps to prevent the lubricant protective film from breaking. Any engine is exposed to harsh conditions. Extreme temperature and pressure, friction, sludge accumulation. The molecular structure of quartz with ART stays strong to perfectly lubricate and protect engine parts in all conditions. And the results are outstanding. Protection against sludge buildup improved by 18%. Protection against mechanical wear improved by 74%. Thanks to quartz with ART, save on maintenance and preserve your engine's power. So next time you wonder which engine oil to use, choose performance and protection that last longer. Quartz with age resistance technology. Keep your engine younger for longer.
Are you looking for low-cost television advertising? Have we got a deal for you? Advertise on Channel 5's Daily Classifieds. Channel 5's Daily Classifieds is one of the most effective methods for introducing yourself and your business to the community. Use our Daily Classifieds to recruit employees, promote specials, promote your products or services, promote a business opportunity, increase traffic to your website, and advertise items you have for sale. Let us help you to save valuable time and money. Call us today at 280-0013 or visit us at our offices on Coney Drive to discuss how we can help your business grow affordably. Channel 5's Daily Classifieds. Advertise today.
Isani Cayetano, Marion Alley, Paul Lopez, Brittany Gordon. Your News 5 police teams do whatever it takes, go wherever they need to go, so you can catch the story wherever you are, whenever you want, on whatever device. Channel 5 believes on television, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, because news is now everywhere, all the time, and so are we.
Whether you're at home, on the road, at work, or at school, if you see news happening or suspect that something might be up, call or text the Channel 5 News Belize tip line at 672-5555. You don't have to give us your name, just give us the tip. That's 672-5555. Call or text us so we can check it out.
When someone you love becomes a memory, the memory becomes a treasure. Channel 5 introduces the Daily Obituaries. The Daily Obituaries will broadcast all death and funeral announcements and memorials to honor your loved one's life and memories. The Daily Obituaries airs on Channel 5 prior to the evening newscast, with subsequent repeats at 10 p.m. and 12 noon the following day. It will also be placed online on our social media platforms, all for a standard package fee. Celebrate their lives and memories with Channel 5's Daily Obituaries. Honor in life and reverence in death.
Yes. So we have with us here, as we mentioned, Ramil Arana, and he is an independent consultant. Good morning, Ramil. How you doing?
I'm fine. Every time I'm in this seat, I feel like I'm in the hot seat.
Yeah.
This topic is particularly interesting.
Well, you know, we have to go to the experts. And of course, you are an economist. I believe you would be one of the perfect persons to talk to as it relates to finance here in Belize. And in this case, exploring the correlation between cruise tourism, the opportunities that can be given to persons working in this industry from a banking perspective. So let's begin perhaps with a little bit of what you do as perhaps a financial advisor or an economist.
Well, throughout the years, well, I started my career actually at the central bank. So I was part of what could be seen as well, not what could be seen, what is the supervisory arm of the financial system. My particular role as an economist was to understand the statistics, write monthly reports, do analytic reviews of the financial system and the system on a whole, the real sector, which tourism belongs to. That's how we broke it down from a central bank perspective. So, of course, tourism is a large part of our economy. We saw that what happened when a few years ago with COVID, when the entire economy crashed because we couldn't have any more visitors. I mean, overall, in terms of cruise and stayover visitors, we get probably about twice the size of our economy here, like almost 600,000 people in comparison to that 350, I think it was about 390,000 people now. But you could see the level, just the sheer mass of people that is coming into the country really brings a lot in terms from the economic perspective.
So we're looking at a situation where, because tourism is the #1 revenue generator for this country, you have persons who come in as stakeholders in this industry. There's a situation where an individual has an interest in developing either a port or any form of business that's related to tourism, cruise tourism primarily. Walk us through the process in terms of them being able to, first of all, be able to pitch a proposal to any bank in search of financing for this kind of an initiative.
Well, if we're being very honest, any tourism project, especially if it's one that would keep the money within the Belizean system, is very, very welcome. Because unfortunately, we have a system whereby a lot of the investors are foreigners, which means that they would come, they probably don't need our local financial system. They have the seed capital on their own, and they would conduct, they would do their business, get their operations running, and that money would be funneled out, right back out of the country.
Yeah, it's extractive.
Yeah, it's very extractive. So when you're talking about, if you're talking about a local investor now, going to a bank, especially if we're talking about the cruise tourism sector, which has for a while been very underdeveloped, there's pretty much just a bunch of, not to say that this is a bad thing in any way, just a bunch of individuals just grabbing the tourists and taking them out.
Merchants.
Yeah, we haven't had much development, except by Fort Street, but we haven't had much development to keep the tourists here, have them spend their money, different things like that. So for a specific sector of the economy, when you're talking about cruise tourism, that has been growing for years on end.
Yeah.
So that's significant growth, and we haven't had the opportunity to capture a lot of the revenues that we have. So an individual who would come to pitch, it's a no-brainer for the banks, quite honestly. If all of the financials behind it, if all of the operations behind it are solid, a bank would be very much interested in providing that capital or providing those loans, because of course the bank is a business, so repayment is very much realistic, and it would be, for most of these businesses, it would be better than a business plan would entail, you know. So it's a very good expenditure for anybody in the country.
But there are certain points you'd have to be able to satisfy, or requirements, if I could use that description.
There are always requirements. When we're talking about the banking system itself, again, I mentioned I started my career at the central bank. The central bank is the overseer, is the supervisor. So these banks have to fall in line if for lack of better words at this point, but they have to ensure that certain requirements are met. And if we're talking about a business going to a bank, that business would have to have some type of operational structure, some type of financial structure. You can't just show up with an idea and say, okay, this idea will manifest. There has to be some type of structure. You have to have some business planning. You have to have some type of organization to show that, of course, the operations will be solid. It's not just something that, okay, we're just going to go out there with hope.
When you look at the scale of these types of ventures, though, because you could do a small mom and pop kind of an operation and then seek financing from the bank. But when you're looking at developing something that is in the hundreds of millions, you have to have, in my opinion, some kind of sound footing to be able to present to the bank and say, look, perhaps this is how I would collateralize a loan to be able to fund such an initiative.
Of course, that has to be part of it. When we're talking about the Belizean financial system on a whole, I think there's 4 banks we have right now. The 4 banks combined have a little bit over, I think, $5 billion in assets. So if you're looking at a loan that's $100 million on any one of the books, that's a very significant structure, a significant portion of the structure. In fact, for many of the banks, that would be considered something that could bring about systemic risk. When we're talking about systemic risk, it's risk of the failure of the entire structure alone. If we're talking about an individual bank, a loan like that going bad could risk the entire bank's operations. That's why in a situation where you require that level of funding, it's always an idea, and it's promoted within the Belizean financial system to spread that risk among different institutions or investors.
Speaking of risks, and I love where the conversation is headed so far, because as Isani mentioned, there are businesses that are much smaller, but like the example that we are currently seeing in our news, there is a particular port and a particular bank here in Belize having an issue because of an investment so big. What would you say, aside from the financial risks of the business not paying back to time, are the other risks that a bank or a lending institution would face with something like this?
Well, of course, there is, aside from the credit risk that you had mentioned, if there is a particular institution that would try to take up the entirety of that financing by themselves, there could be the issue of liquidity risk, whereby, of course, the cash assets that the bank has would not be able to manage both that large investment in terms of that large disbursement and the other obligations that they have, because we're talking about one specific loan, but a bank has several other loans as assets on its balance sheet. It has customer deposits that it has to meet and all of that. So there would be you'd have to face that liquidity risk every day, knowing that you're going to be financing all of that on your own. That's why there are structures in which the bank may try to structure their disbursements based on different phases of projects and all of that, just to manage that liquidity in and of itself. But of course, the credit risk is the most significant that we're speaking about there. And banks take steps, like I said, just to ensure that they're going to be able to manage the demands from all of their customers, their depositors, etc., to get this done. So,
is there a conflict, perhaps, when you have a bank being able to finance a large-scale operation and you have persons within the bank who become stakeholders in that particular venture? How does that work? Because I'm asking because I read a release recently where an allegation was being made that seems to go against what the normal practice would be in terms of being able to fund a project such as this?
Oh, of course, there's a significant conflict of interest that exists there, especially if the individual has significant influence, to get that project off the ground. But generally, you try to avoid these types of things. And if we're talking about a large investment, like we've been mentioning here, those come under a lot of scrutiny. Like I mentioned, coming from the central bank has a whole banking supervision and compliance sector that tries to ensure that the functioning of these types of the financial system on a whole is essentially on the up and up. We don't follow regulations and all of that. So they do things in terms of they visit the banks, their site visits. They gather the data to look for any irregularities. And when you're talking about a large loan, something we're speaking about, something over $100 million, that is scrutinized to to no end. Some even think that the scrutiny is way too much for the financial system to actually function properly. But as we said, that those types of things could compose a systemic risk. And the central bank's mandate is to maintain the stability of the financial system.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at these types of things, we have to ensure that everything functions as per normal. So that conflict of interest is something that definitely would and should be flagged in the interest of Belizeans on a whole and how the financial system is functioning.
So with the case that we've been touching on, which for persons who have been following the news, we know that it has to do with Atlantic Bank and Finstein. Talk to me about what would be the role of the central bank in a situation like this.
Of course. Well, I just mentioned, like, there is the central bank does provide specifically the supervision department. They do have to have their eyes on investments like this. Again, it's huge, and it was, I think I was there at the time. I wasn't in the supervision department, but I do remember that the entire investment, it wasn't prudent for the entire investment to be taken on by one specific bank. So just from that conversation alone, which I got the edge of it, it simply means that the central bank was involved in understanding what was going on, because their mandate to ensure that the financial system is stable could be undermined if something like this were to go under. So they have to know the details, they have to know the specifics, they have to understand that all elements of this financing operation is going to be solid for the financial system to operate properly and for the economy of Belize itself.
For our viewers who would appreciate a breakdown of what exactly is taking place between this business and this bank, can you provide that information to them from an economist's perspective and, of course, a financial specialist perspective? Break it down easy for us. What's taking place?
Try to make it a little bit easier, because everybody says
what's taking place between this business and this bank?
Yeah, everybody says economists kind of talk too technical sometimes, so let me try to make it as simple as possible. In terms of the operations of the project, and let me just preface this by saying I'm trying to be as objective as possible, right? You provide a loan. A bank is a business, of course. So if you're in the business of lending money, you want to ensure that you receive that money back in due time. From what has been playing out in the public domain, the project, State Bank project, has been experiencing significant delays in terms of getting all of the operations, getting the construction done and getting the operations started. For whatever reasons may have been cited by the ownership, etc. I think there's a case where there was a litigation against the government and all of that. But from the lender's perspective, the fact that you haven't commenced operations on time represents a credit risk for them, that you are not going to be able to repay according to the schedule, and that is a huge issue. So if I lend you, it's the same thing. If I lend my family member some money and they don't pay me back, of course I'm going to be concerned.
On the time when they said they would start.
I'm going to be very, very concerned. So
Yes.
I have to ensure that I receive my repayment in that way. Now the loan is supposed to be collateralized by the value of the structures there.
Yeah.
So the buildings, the land, etc., that is the collateral for the loan, and that's why the loan was provided. So essentially, I believe a part of it is that part of the collateral is not within the business itself. Now, there's a lot of legal issues regarding that, but the bank needs to ensure that their money is going to be repaid. So in the extreme case, I'm not saying that this is the case, in the extreme case that the operations need to be liquidated, and let's say, okay, I lent my cousin $100, and they say, all right, hold here, this item worth $50. I'm still not getting back the entirety of my money. So again, that is a significant concern. So there's a part of the collateral that is not within the company itself. So again, that provides a risk to me that I won't be able to recover the entirety of my investment. So what happened is that I think the operations went into receivership. And when you talk about receivership, everybody thinks that it's a horrible thing. But what a receiver actually does is that they take over the operations of the project. In this case, receivers have several different roles, but in this case, I do believe that the receivership is to ensure that the project is completed.
Yeah.
So you
They're also seeking the remainder of the monies that are necessary to complete the project.
Yes, because I believe, I think the news was that it was about $50 million that it's going to take. But the receiver is going to be responsible for all things in terms of operations, in terms of finances and all that. And they appointed a very qualified receiver who has been at the head of operations in different companies within Belize and all of that, and has a wealth of experience. So the receiver is there not to undermine the ownership, because the ownership still remains with the ownership group. But the receiver is to ensure that the project gets from where it's at now to completion. And even so, with the receiver will work with the bank and will try to work with other financiers, if possible, to get the remainder of that funds and so to ensure that the operations get underway. So in that way, the Atlantic Bank will be able to receive their payments going forward.
Step back a bit and explain for us what a mortgage debenture is, because that's part of the language that was used in one of the releases as well. We may not necessarily be clear on that.
A mortgage debenture it's essentially just a financial instrument. It's basically a loan. When you're talking about a mortgage debenture, it's generally providing funding for building, for construction, for real estate. It's just describing a specific type of loan. In this case, when you're talking about a mortgage debenture, we're talking about a loan that was provided for the construction and for the land that is involved in the project itself. Now, I think the issue kind of came to a head, which I mentioned a little while ago, is that the mortgage was supposed to be backed by collateral, and the total value of the collateral does not lie within the operations of the business. So that is where the issue is. But it simply just describes a category of loans. That's what
Can funds be issued before a mortgage debenture?
is signed?
Yes.
No, that is, it shouldn't. It really shouldn't, but there are different agreements that could be made within the operational structure and within the negotiations between the borrower and the lender, that could entail that, all right, we will proceed in this manner. But if we're being very honest about everything, if we're looking at funds in such a large amount, there needs to be signatories to an agreement before those type of funds are provided, because it's being imprudent. You're not doing your proper work if you're just going to
give money without signing a contract.
And that does require a bit of scrutiny if we're talking about that.
Yeah. Well, we've touched on a bit more details, or we broke down the allegations being made. We also spoke on this from a banking perspective. I think another interesting point that would benefit our viewers is to know why this information is important for them to understand. How does this affect the smaller person on the ground?
Well, again, I did mention the special case, not this case, not at the moment. I did mention the special case in which we have occurrences that represent systemic risk.
Yeah.
So hypothetically, if we're talking about a bank's operations and they may not have the level of liquidity, and liquidity, when we're talking about liquidity, we're talking about available cash assets or near cash assets to manage the demands for their service. Then there could be the extreme issue where a depositor would go and say, I need to withdraw some money, and that money would not be available. Those are like extreme type issues. And also, when we're talking about these large transactions should trickle down to the individuals, especially in a case where, let's say, the bank isn't receiving their money, and that money goes back into their operations because it's all a part of their structure. So their assets goes back into the assets in terms of the loans that they're providing, has to be able to take care of the liabilities, which is the depositor side. So they need to have that funding available for its operations to pay their staff, to deal with other loans, to deal with the withdrawals and all of these from the system. However, I must reiterate, I think I've done it a few times, we have the central bank structure that oversees what's going on in all of these banks. And they provide the information online. It's not going to be provided on a bank-by-bank basis, but, well, some of the information is provided on a bank-by-bank basis where they review these financial systems and these financial institutions, and they give what is their liquidity standing. And they have their benchmarks and all of these things. So they have the full structure there, whereby they could tell you, all right, this bank might have issues in terms of credit risk. These banks might have issues in terms of their capitalization. These banks might have issues in terms of their liquidity.
Yeah.
So at this moment, and just looking at the statistics, there is no specific bank that has that issue based on the supervisory structure of the central bank, and they have been going more into a more risk-based evaluation of these banks. At first, it was you just need to have a certain level of capital, but now the supervisory structure of the central bank, the supervisory framework, is being moved to a more risk-based structure. So they have how to handle credit risk, they have how to handle liquidity risk. They're still in the process where they're moving over, but that in and of itself would put the banks under a bit more scrutiny, and they would make them a little bit uncomfortable. I wouldn't want to be under excessive scrutiny from a supervisor, but that's just the reality. And I think the Belizean system on a whole, there's a very good relationship between supervisor and supervised. I've known many situations in which you talk to any worker and they'll tell you, well, I hate my supervisor. But we've had a very decent working relationships, and there will be spats, but between the supervisor, the central bank, and the domestic banks and the credit unions and all, there's been a good relationship, so they do have these things under control.
How do you look at the idea of a project, perhaps ambitious in its scope, that may very well be seen as too big to fail based on the size of the loan and the monies being pumped in?
Too big to fail. That line reminds me of the time when where there was the bailout. That was the global financial crisis a few years ago.
Yeah.
When we're talking about these types of projects, of course, again,
Come on back.
oh man.
Well, we need to reset anyway.
Oh man.